Welcome to Between Product and Partnerships, a podcast focused on bringing together product, partnership, and engineering leaders to discuss how to build, support, and scale SaaS ecosystems. This podcast is presented by Pandium, an integration platform for building native integrations.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for listening to our podcast, Between Product and Partnerships, where we talk about the challenges and what it takes to build integrations, partnerships, and SaaS platforms. And today, I'm so excited to have Chris on our podcast. I cannot believe that we have not done this already. He is the co-founder at Partnership Leaders, and we've known each other for quite some time. Chris, it would be great to hear a little bit more about your background for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a pleasure to be here, Cristina. It's you've been a longtime friend in the industry. I've gone to you for all kinds of questions about technology integrations and stuff over the years. So it's great to be here. So my name's Chris Samila. I'm one of the co-founders of Partnership Leaders. We've in essence built a global community for people in the partnerships profession. I run sort of the events side of the business now, and before coming to Partnership Leaders, I was a partnership professional. I've kind of been in that role for most of my career. I started in the clean tech space, ended up going to the SaaS industry at some point, worked for Optimizely, Full Story, and then also built the partner program at Crossbeam before going full-time on PL about 3.5, 4 years ago.
Thank you so much. And you and I met when you were at Crossbeam, feels like a billion years ago, but so glad that we can finally have you join us on this podcast. So we got all kinds of questions. You're a very seasoned partnership professional, but to start it out, what would you say are the key characteristics in companies that activate their ecosystem well versus those that don't?
Yeah, it's a great question. We think a lot about this as as an organization inside Partnership Leaders, and we've done some research such as the Ecosystem Compass, and we've looked at why do some companies succeed with their sort of leverage in the ecosystem. There's a few components. Number one, the executive sort of support is critical. I think there's a litany of companies out there that still think of partnerships as the channel team off in the corner, managing the resellers and maybe the distributors and things like that, versus a modern company that really fully leverages their ecosystem is thinking about this on a very strategic level. It impacts the product journey. It impacts the post-sale customer journey. From a services perspective, it is embedded into a lot of different motions for the company that you in essence look at all the different players around your business, whether they're agencies or tech partners or affiliate partners, and you design an ecosystem strategy that sort of figures out how do I leverage all those in the right order. I think that's, even in my role in the past, I've sometimes started, in one place with, say, tech partnerships, and then realized, oh, this is actually harder than it needs to be right now because we don't have the right APIs or whatever it might be. And then so being able to sort of pivot over into another type of channel is really key. And so, size doesn't always matter in this sense. I think a lot of people think I'm not Microsoft, so I don't have hundreds of thousands of partners. So what can I do with my ecosystem? And I think this is where, being really thoughtful about, you may perceive yourself as a smaller organization. I've always liked the planet analogy of there's, you may not be the sun in all cases, but you still might be Jupiter, and there's still moons around you with other companies that care about the joint value proposition that can be created with collaboration with your organization. And so I think that's having a really strong perspective on who do you want to partner with, when do you want to partner with them, and then being able to articulate that to the executive team so you get the support from the entire business is really key. And it sort of falls in line with another area we've spent time on, which is the notion of a chief partnerships officer, but I won't go too deeply into that right now.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the order of the different types of partnerships. That's something that I don't hear about a lot. I'm curious if you have advice to folks on how to attack that if they're coming in as the first partnership person or maybe the second partnership person, how to figure out what that framework should look like and then how to sell that internally.
Yeah, absolutely. So my friend Nelson Wang, a longtime partnerships person in the space I worked with in Optimizely, he spent a bunch of time talking about this idea of first principles, where you should, as a partner leader, even when you first land in the role, deeply going into like, why do your customers, maybe already work with some partners, or where are the gaps at, that goes back to sort of that customer centricity of, I'm only going to build a partner motion or channel based on ideally some demand that might be already in place, or you can very quickly create demand based on sort of like what the customer ultimately needs. And so this, a really cool example of this is, you think of all the big, LLM solutions, the AI solutions. There is this perception like, oh, they have all these tech partners probably that they're engaged with. And the reality is right now is that their customers actually need the most help from service organizations that can really embed these AI solutions into the businesses, especially on the enterprise scale of things. And so they're spending all their cycles, or the majority of their cycles, on working with boutique service organizations. They're not spending cycles with the giant other technology companies as much as they are, hey, what does my customer need right now? And where, as a partner team, can I get the most leverage by leaning in on that? And so, I think keeping that embedded into how you think about where you spend your cycles is really important.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, services historically have been, like, lava for SaaS companies. It's like, "No, no, 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 never services, never, 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 self-sign up, everything." And now we see, I think it was OpenAI, or maybe it was Anthropic, coming out and being like, "Oh, we're actually gonna, like, make a bajillion dollars doing services." Um, I'm sure there will become more companies that do that type of thing, and I wonder how we're gonna see the transition from, like, in-house teams to external teams back to in-house teams. Like, when do you, and I don't think that you have an answer to this, more rhetorical, like, as a business, how do you know when you should do it in-house? How do you know when you should actually be building that mechanism? You don't wanna be competitive to your partners, but you don't wanna bring on partners that are competitive to you. Yeah, I don't know if you've worked at anywhere that has experience with that. It's an interesting shift.
Yeah, so we actually did that at Full Story. I think there's a the reality is, 2 years ago approximately, the venture capital space changed, and it's now harder to raise funds, et cetera. And so you've seen a trickle down effect where you may not have as big of a CSM team as you might have had a few years ago, or the scaling of that is just, the math doesn't work as well. And so literally this morning, inside partnership leaders, one of our members was talking about like, hey, I need to stand up this like services motion where I leverage partners to come in and complement with what my CSM team actually does. And so doing that well, Paul Cavello from CrowdStrike spoke about this at Catalyst, of like how they've done this at CrowdStrike. That elegant dance of, you might have some in-house services, pro services teams already in place. Where do they stop and where do the partners begin? I had to do this at Full Story, where we realized we needed to create a motion where service organizations could figure out, how do I make money around what a Full Story did? And they were sort of in the digital experience analytics space. And the reality is nobody had services around that at that time. So I spent a bunch
Mhm.
of cycles kind of figuring out with a handful of boutique partners, like, what are those services look like? What does the team look like? How long does it take? How much should you charge? And I think this is like something that the partnerships team should be thinking about, because when you do it well, all of a sudden now you've got a bunch of partners that are making money around your solution. And that's kind of the key for unlocking bigger and bigger partnerships, especially if you want to move into like GSIs, aka global systems integrators. They're going to ask you like, how do I make money on this? Like,
Mhm.
referral fees don't move the needle for most of those organizations. And so that, as a partner leader, having sort of a lens on, how do I understand how somebody else around me makes money, whether that's services or something else, like, that makes you a much more effective negotiator as you go and try to activate some of those channels.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it'll be different, right, depending on the maturity of your company. You can only, in my opinion, have success with that sort of like implementation partner model if your product is at a place where you already feel like you've got decent product market fit and you don't need to have as direct of communication with your customers, right? So I've definitely talked to folks that are early stage and are like, we're just going to have implementation partners and resellers do everything. I'm like, I mean, it's hard to be like that many degrees away from your user. And it's also like, from a partnership perspective, maybe not fair to give that to a potential partner, like, to, hey, you
Yeah.
figure out how to sell it. Like, that always makes me a little bit nervous, but um
this is where those sort of logical places where maybe your internal services team does large enterprise customers that you don't want to potentially risk having something go sideways, or when you have new products that come out. So back at Full Story, we actually had a motion where 20% of the services went to our internal team. And you have to have, and I believe this is the case, is you want to have like guardrails in place where that team doesn't become seen as a high revenue center for the company, because a lot of times the venture capital space doesn't look at you the same way if it's not ARR, recurring revenue. Um, but I think there's like, if you can model it in such a way where the internal customer success team actually, or pro services team, learns how to help customers with the new products or figure out those service packages, and then have that pro services team motivated and incentivized to actually train the partners on what those services look like, you can have a very sort of flywheel effect kind of thing in place here that both sides win in essence, I think. And I've seen this at my company I've worked at, as well as other ones, is when designed correctly with the right guardrails, you can have a pro services team that also works kind of sort of parallel to a thriving services ecosystem.
That's cool. And I like the idea of the sort of like dual compensation where it's like, oh, we're actually going to give maybe it's spiffs or commission or something on the partner that is also getting a little bit of commission. Um, I'm curious, that kind of parlays into a question that folks have had around compensation for partnership folks. Like there's so many different kinds of partnership professionals. What have you seen recently when it comes to comp packages and how these kinds of compensation strategies are being structured?
Yeah, I think so. We started. Well, I'll go back a step. We noticed that there was a problem where partner people weren't being paid the right amounts, especially technology companies. And we're like, why is this happening? And it turns out that the HR team is relying on data, and I won't name them here. I don't want to shame them, but like, there's a lot of databases that rely on sort of compensation levels and leveling and things like that that may not be totally up to date. And so, like, the concept of like a technology partner professional or an alliances leader are getting like blended in with like business development, which could be SDRs. And
Hmm.
so, like, this is kind of messing with having really good data on what partner people should be paid, both here in North America and abroad. And so about a year ago, we started messaging the 50,000 plus people in our database of all partner leaders and saying, hey, where do you live? What's your role? What do you get paid? And the data that's come back, we've sort of built a really nice database of like what this looks like. And the kind of the story right now, and like, not to be dark and depressing, but if you're working somewhere right now and you're gainfully employed, think real hard about leaving that company, because what's happening in the market right now is there's a lot of people out of work. The federal statistics are starting to show the reality of what this looks like right now, and we've seen this, and I'm sure people who are listening may have peers or they themselves might be out of work. And it's a challenging market right now. I think that there's opportunities to, if I was unemployed right now, I would be spending my cycles on which high growth AI companies don't have a partner program yet, but would logically probably develop one in the near future. There's a litany of these companies that have incredibly large market growth statistics, because they have a PLG motion or a product led growth motion, but they might not have like a B2B partnerships motion in place yet. And so, like, if I was, on the bench right now, not working, I would definitely be looking at that. And then the other sort of thing we're seeing as, especially like amongst a lot of the partnership leaders members that have, maybe worked at Series A and Series B companies, a lot of those folks are now going into larger enterprise companies, and they're sort of bringing the experimentation mindset and the fast growth mindset over to larger enterprise companies to help them transform their partnership programs.
I think there's this almost like second wave of digital transformation, quote unquote, happening now with all the AI stuff, like large companies being like, we've got to use AI. I wonder if there's also maybe a secondary sort of momentum behind being faster and smarter. Like it's gotten a little bit of you know, a, a a little bit of a refresh of people being like, oh, maybe we could do our business a little bit differently sparked by AI, but maybe not specifically with AI for some of those enterprises. I'm curious
Yeah.
anecdotally if you feel like with the kind of job market the way it is right now, if you're seeing more or any patterns within the different kinds of partnership managers. Like there's obviously like tech partnerships, there's resellers, agency, there's influencer, all this different stuff. Do you think that any one of those is, more or less employable or needs different skill sets or sort of what's your take?
So one sort of bright spot for sure within the larger landscape of like roles that people can move into is like partner operations is becoming more and more of a thing. In some organizations, they pull over the RevOps team to help out. But if you're a decent sized partner program, it's relatively short order. You do need somebody focused on sort of the partner operations, and sometimes we do see a blend of like partner programs and operations as a role. But especially now, as even this week, I've had two different phone calls with bespoke partner program specific AI tools that literally didn't exist last month, and they're coming. I mean, there's going to be a bunch more of these, and I think the reality is if you want to continue scaling your partner program, you're going to have to think about the tech stack in a really thoughtful way, and you can get massive efficiency gains if done correctly. So I think the partner operations person is going to be sitting, in the driver's seat on like which tools might they deploy, and whether that's for like partner enablement. Like one of the tools I just looked at, in essence, knew what was happening on the screen, and a partner could be going through your product and asking questions, and in essence, sort of realizing they did or didn't understand how that tool worked, and the AI tool completely trained them on where they're maybe making missteps. I mean, and it works in 60 languages. Like that's mind blowing. I mean, you could literally have a giant long tail of partners that to deploy a partner SE or a sales engineer to help those partners one off is very expensive at scale.
Hmm.
But I think these bespoke sort of AI solutions that are spending, that are really focused on our space is really encouraging because I think we've been in the past sort of forgotten compared to sales and marketing when it came to bespoke tooling. And not to be said that we don't have like PRMs and account mapping solutions and things like that, but there is absolutely a whole wave of new like sort of AI native solutions coming out, and I think partner operations is going to help kind of manage that. So I think that's one area. If you're interested in that, that's a great place to spend cycles. And then like the other big shift we're seeing happening is if you're like a chief channel officer, like we track the growth of like chief partnership officer versus chief channel officer, and we've seen the CPO role really take off because their remit includes a lot of stuff that maybe a chief channel officer didn't spend cycles on. And that could be your product strategy, in collaboration with, the technology partnerships and things like that. It's potentially the M&A strategy. Because think about if you're a partner leader, you're seeing everything else in the market that
Hmm.
you could partner with. Some of those could be acquisition targets. And so we've seen this like CPO role start to really ramp up. And you've had both large enterprise companies like Microsoft and SAP, et cetera, anoint these sort of chief partner officers. And we're seeing it now shift down into mid-market companies as well. So I'm very bullish for the VPs of partnerships out there that want an even larger sort of scope. There's a lane for you and a seat at the table, which is really cool.
How big do you think a company needs to be able to have a role like that or for it to be useful?
Yeah, I would say like once you're sort of solidly in the mid-market space of like 100 million ARR and above, and say 30% of your source revenue coming from partners, like you got to have the kind of wheels turning a bit.
Hmm.
Otherwise, a VP of partnerships title is totally fine. But once you get to be, a few hundred employees, north of 100 million ARR, and like multiple sort of channels activated. You have solutions partnerships, you have tech partnerships, you have a marketplace strategy. You're thinking about M&A. Like once all those balls are kind of in the air, somebody should be sitting at the C-suite table, kind of helping manage that.
Cool. That's very tactical and useful. And yeah, I think hiring those people too early, to your point, is like if you don't already have the sort of processes in place or starting to come into place, might not be as effective. I'm curious too. I know in the past we've talked about this, and you introduced me to this concept of outsourced partnership teams. I did not know that companies were using outsourced teams for this. I don't know why I didn't think about that because I feel like people can outsource basically anything. But I'm curious what you're seeing, like what size companies are using this, what's the structure, and how are you seeing companies get gains from that?
Yeah, this is another thing that I also did not leverage this when I was in the role of the VP of partnerships, and about 2 years ago, Tim Sao from Stripe at the time spoke at Catalyst about how they've scaled the Stripe partnerships team, sort of blending both internal, in-house partner professionals, and then also leveraging these sort of, you know, outsourced firms in essence that could do a whole litany of different things. It could be partner management, it could be partner marketing. There's some pretty large ecosystem players in our space that, like, all of their partner managers are actually, sitting with another company, and it's all managed outside the business. And what's sort of fascinating, I think this is where like AI, because it sort of intersects with some of these outsource companies, is they're, these outsource companies are also building tooling for themselves, leveraging AI so that when they get dropped into a company, very quickly they can figure out the joint value proposition and then like ramp up the number of, the amount of collateral or the amount of things they're doing. Because they just got like this flywheel in effect where they've done this now for other, and these are generally larger companies. I mean, you got to be sort of like trending towards enterprise, I think, for this to really make sense at scale. Um, but yeah, it's a thing. I mean, BarsDev, MarketStar, there's a number of these companies that um, they're growing pretty aggressively right now. And I think this is, you could be like, oh, this is like bad. Like we're going to lose jobs. But the reality, I think what we see is that um, as companies invest in their ecosystems, they need to grow very quickly, and hiring a bunch of people in house versus like, hey, you could deploy a bunch of partner managers in like very short order that are very skilled up. I think it's both, and so I think
Mhm.
as the industry grows and as companies lean harder into the leveraging their partnership motion, it's wise for them to think about like, where does it make sense for us to carve off? Maybe we have a high growth area on partner marketing or partner management or partner enablement, you know, those trade-offs of like, do I hire a bunch of people in house versus leveraging someone externally? I think that's going to become more and more and more common, and it's definitely a conversation point we see inside the community itself right now.
How do you think that plays with the relationship-based nature of partnerships? Like, I'm thinking like when we have partners and I need something, like someone on my team can reach out and be like, "Hey, could you go poke so and so?" Or, we have executive sponsors and stuff like that. With these outsourced teams, are they sort of like the front line and then there's still someone that owns the book of business, or, maybe it's segmented in some way at the parent company, or maybe the relationship is less important when you get to a certain size? I'm curious what your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've not personally used these folks, but
Mhm.
I do know that they in some cases have been with their clients for like years and years and years. I think back to one of the conversations I had with one of them where they've had one specific account for I think like 15 years, and those employees have emails. You wouldn't know. In essence, it's not the a partner manager that's working full time at the company, and so like I think in some cases like they will feel the same
Mhm.
to these folks. In other scenarios, they're dropped in for a large campaign and there's a certain life cycle to that, and they may not have to have as much contextual history of maybe some of these relationships for these accounts. But yeah, it's a good question. I don't have as much like firsthand experience
Mhm.
there other than just kind of some of these conversations with folks.
Yeah, and I wonder if that, like, person-to-person relationship, like you and I are having right now, like these types of conversations, if they will become more or less important in sort of the era of AI, like, and the era of, like, more distributed work and the democratization of tech and da 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 da, all that stuff. Um, yeah, I don't know, and maybe it'll be different depending on different verticals. I mean, when you get into, like, really, really deep enterprise, folks that have been at companies for 20 plus years, like, I think those relationships are never not going to be important, but,
Oh yeah, for sure.
um,
I
yeah,
would.
I'm not sure if we're gonna swing the opposite way where it's like, I need to speak to a person, I refuse to talk to a bot, or if it'll just be a nice to have, I don't know.
I think it's going to get hard to tell in relatively short order, at least for like intro level conversations. Like some of the AI solutions for scheduling of things and whatnot are kind of amazing already, and they're only going to get better. And some of those are also growing. If you're a partner person looking for work, go check out some of the AI solutions, sort of chasing the legacy industries like dentist appointments
Hmm.
and mechanical appointments. Like some of the companies in that sector are killing it right now from a growth perspective. But I want to speak to one of your comments, which is like, I do think the face-to-face interaction of like partner managers, we see this on our side right now through the lens of like the events. Like we are having by far some of the highest attendance we've ever had. So like our city events to the conference, and we have full-time people that are like event managers that help us
Hmm.
obviously bring these events to life. And they hear from their peers the same thing. Like events are a thing, physical events are a thing. And I think that's because people are hungry for in the post COVID era. You only want to do so many Zoom meetings before you want to have like a deeper conversation with somebody. So I'm quite bullish on we're going to see people want to connect in person. And the reality is some of the larger companies, Amazon, Microsoft, et cetera, the return to office thing is now
Hmm.
seemingly accelerating here in the States, and it was already the case in Europe and in Australia. So that's gonna be interesting, because a lot of us in the partner space, we moved to remote places, and I don't know what's going to happen in that sense. I think that there's definitely a lot of folks that now are being required to go back to the downtown setting, and they might be pretty far away.
Yeah, and who knows how some of these larger companies have set up their comp structure based on geographic location. Like it's hard to require someone to now go into an office in San Francisco if they're living obviously out of state, but living somewhere much cheaper, and maybe you're paying them less as a result of that. Like I don't know what the standard is for these larger companies, but it's wild to me that we're still talking about RTO. Like just the fact that COVID was 5 years ago, and it's like we're still having the reverberations of that, and we are. Like, I'm not discounting it, I feel it, for sure. I was talking to my marketing team today, and, like, I'm trying to go to an event a week, like, out of the house, in person. We're a fully remote company, and it really helps to, like, get the juices flowing and talk to people and, try to make them something valuable and useful, but I love being out of the house and getting to like when I get to see you in person, it's awesome. I'm like, "Oh, Chris, big hug," it's just so nice. I don't know how long we're gonna still be talking about this,
Yeah.
Uh,
I
it's pretty daunting.
definitely, I feel you on that one. There's something special about that, in-person sort of interaction. I do feel like one thing, if I were to forecast what's gonna happen next year, like, we're trying to get all of our events on the calendar, like, almost a year in advance, as much or at least
Mhm.
6 months in advance, and what we saw, over the last, because we do these, like, Catalyst Summits, which are in specific cities. They're, smaller half-day events. 30% of the people that went to the New York one flew to New York for that event because they wrapped all their business meetings around going to that event. And it's like, I think that's for the folks that are work from home. I imagine that's going to become more and more common where you're just like, okay, I'm gonna sort of co-locate a bunch of business travel with an event of some type. So you're knocking out, two birds, one stone kind of thing. And yeah, I think that's just going to become more and more common for especially all the remote folks.
100%. I mean, I do that even just I live in New York, and even just if I'm going into the city to go to an event, like I'm in the city right now, I will try to like have a breakfast, have a lunch, have a dinner, like just really try to get as many people as possible. And obviously New York has a lot of events. If there's I think Grow is about to be next week or the following, and like all the ecom folks are here, and I'm like, I will come to you. Where do you want to get a coffee? Where do you want your 15th coffee on that day? I don't even remember what it was like before COVID. I think we kinda did that, but maybe people are a little more excited to meet in person. Like, I remember the first time I met you in person, after talking to you on Zoom forever, we had breakfast, and I was like, "Oh, cool. It's so nice." I don't remember what year that was,
Three
but,
dimensional.
I know, like, tall. It's all about how tall people are. Yeah, it's wild that, this is not related to partnerships necessarily, but it is just an interesting thing, and I was talking to someone else about RTO this morning, so it's definitely still top of mind, and yeah, I don't know, I feel like all of the operational excellence in the world and the tooling in the world is great, but it can't compete with that personal interaction. Like that's when you really get, the straight talk and like the real story and the real actual vibes, is having that, that real life sort of face to face. Also,
Yeah.
especially now that everything is being recorded on the internet. Like I just don't trust any of it, to be honest with you. Like I assume like this is obviously being recorded because it's a podcast, but I just assume everything I talk about online, on video is could end up somewhere.
Yeah, that's probably quite accurate. I do remember it was actually 2 years ago that I met with a VC in London, and he was like, "Yeah, they're large enough that they had quite a large portfolio of investments." And he's like, "Yep, we can see the data tells us that if they're mostly back in office, they're like 15%, higher revenue levels or higher revenue growth." And so there's like I think there is something to that, like in-person connection. Now, granted, like I live in the mountains of Utah. I'm definitely, if I would be sort of in trouble if I had to go to the office every day. So I don't know exactly what the future looks like here, but it seems like the economics are telling us that at least some in office collaboration is probably wise for companies
And humans, just generally,
and
the
humans. Yeah,
sanity of
good for the
humans.
soul.
Yeah, just being alive. Cool. So we're coming up on time, but I did want to ask, since we talked a little bit about AI, like what other trends and partnerships have you seen with AI? I mean, you were saying, go towards the AI companies that don't have partnership programs, but is there anything else that stands out, or maybe that's been surprising to you as of late?
Yeah, so fortuitous timing. Although this recording will probably come out obviously after this happens, but tomorrow, September 18th, we're doing a big webinar and release of about a 6-month arc of work around AI and partnerships that we've been working on. And that was a combination of both talking to partner leaders that were using AI tools to help themselves and their programs, but also some of the AI like AI native companies, especially the frontier LLM solutions. And we've now kind of gotten like a framework in place of almost like a maturity model of how to think about AI. And it sort of starts at the human level of like a partner manager using like an off the shelf chat GPT or something like that, or Gemini, to make themselves more efficient at, you know, doing ideal partner profile
Hmm.
type of motion, or, looking across a portfolio of partners and kind of coming up with a summary of like, what to do next with those partners, et cetera. And so there's like definitely gains to be had. I think a lot of partner people are obviously playing with these LLM solutions to help themselves both business wise and personally. And then from there, it moves into how does the partner program itself actually use
Hmm.
some of these solutions. So if you're feeding, and this is where if you get smart about using like projects in like OpenAI or something like that, where you've given it some context of your partner program so you can more quickly get consistent feedback out of it as a partner team. That's sort of next step. And then from there, you can look at, okay, well, how does the rest of the company actually, like if I'm an AE or a CSM and I need to find the right partner to be able to bring into an engagement, sort of bringing, what the partner ecosystem can help someone with, outside of the partner team within your own company. That's sort of the next step from there. Um, and at some point you start to move into this world of like, okay, well, do we actually get a purpose built AI solution deployed in house that's referencing much larger sets of
Hmm.
data that gives you better context of your business operations. And so yeah, and then there's also a bunch of point solutions that are being deployed in the market right now, that partner teams can in essence leverage. And so yeah, the report's gonna be really cool. Obviously, if anybody's listening to this and wants to check it out, we'll have the recording online and everything. And there's like a larger, like 40-page report that we've put together. And it's cool because also some of the partner tech solutions that we're all familiar with are in some cases running very hard at trying to build in AI capabilities um, that didn't exist 6 months ago. And so like if we can get ourselves out of the drudgery of administrative work and spend more time in relationships by leveraging some of these AI solutions, that's going to make all of us a lot happier, I think, in our jobs.
Yes. Let the bots do the busy work. I love it. I just want to do everything for me. I just want to focus on relationships. Um,
Chugs and hugs, Christina.
yeah, 100%. I just need all the hugs. All right, I think we are coming up on time here. Where can folks find out more about partnership leaders and all the great stuff that you guys are doing?
Yeah. So partnershipleaders.com. So we have the community side, and we've had that for about 7 years now. And there's a bunch of cool stuff we're going to be releasing for the end of the year to help people get more value out of it. I think one of the big learnings was just how essential it is. We've talked about this, like, face-to-face component of obviously partner people getting together, but also just the digital side. I think people are, because so much is changing so quickly, whether it's how your program's structured or how your compensation is developed, or what AI tools you're using, we're seeing like an upswing again in people wanting to network with peers. And these things like ebb and flow with, like, obviously the pandemic and stuff, a lot changed. But we're leaning hard back into the networking aspects of the community to give like tooling around that to make it easier for folks. So there's like the community side of what we do. I manage all of our events. So Catalyst is sort of the sub brand underneath Partnership Leaders that does these events. We have Austin and Denver coming up October 1st and 2nd. We got Dreamforce coming up as a big breakfast event for everybody on Tuesday. I think it's October 14th. And then for all of our friends in Europe, for the first time ever, we're actually coming over to Europe and doing a full-blown conference on October 23rd. So very excited about that. We're pretty much sold out on the event, which is great. And then we're building out all the events for next year. So anticipate, if you're in partnerships, alliances, channels, we're going to be in 18 different cities next year around the world. And then we'll have the big Catalyst conference on the East Coast, somewhere maybe close to you, Christina, possibly.
That would be great. I did love it in Philly. Philly was nice and easy for me. A nice 90-minute train
That was
ride.
Cross-Team's event, but I appreciate that you confused it.
All right, Miami
was us. Denver, Miami, Chicago, Seattle. But yeah, no,
have
we got
another Northeast one.
We're looking. So I was thinking is like, you go from Miami to Denver, Chicago to Seattle. We got to start back over again and make our way to the East Coast. Make it easy for folks on that side of the country. So late next summer, 2026, we'll have the big conference happening there. And then the last piece, if you're listening and you're with a larger enterprise company, we have an Atlas service offering as well now that we work with a bunch of really great brands to help them scale up their partner programs. And so those are the components of what we do over here at Partnership Leaders.
And you're going to be racking up those frequent flyer miles. You're getting all the points. You're going to be everywhere.
I wish they were worth something. If Delta's listening, your program's not great.
No, I'm also Delta, but they're working a nerve with me every time I fly them.
Yeah,
it's too much. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us. This is super fun. We could talk forever, and we have talked forever about so many things. But as Chris said, check out partnershipleaders.com. If you'd like more information about technology partnerships, APIs, integrations, all the fun stuff, you could check out pandium.com. We've got our blog, our podcast, all kinds of great stuff. And yeah, Chris, I'm sure I will see you out there, but thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. And yeah, just to kind of give a big +1, if anybody's thinking about integrations, Cristina is probably one of the sharpest people in the world on that front. So she has a great team. And thank you for having me on. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, thanks, Chris.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed our content, subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. For more content on tech partnerships, integrations, and APIs, check out our articles, ebooks, and other resources in the description or visit Pandium's website.